So today we'll continue to interrogate the opening sequences of this text so you can do the similar thing with the rest of the book as we go. So the reason again why I'm doing this is to remind you that it's important to consider little bits and pieces of this text in that sort of looking at its minutiae, looking at the way in which it engages with meaning through representation in text. So from yesterday we got to that end of the bit about the purpose and value of travel, and then we get this interesting little aside of de Botton describing this incident in a novel or this story, which sort of represents a halting phrase. This is almost de Botton doing the Hamlet thing, delaying and saying, should I or shouldn't I? Should I be participant in travel? And here's one of the reasons I shouldn't. And he talks about this misanthrope, this person, who doesn't really like other people, suddenly having this overwhelming desire to travel to London. This fierce need because he's been reading Dickens. So again, much like Botton's brochure and the old painting, the call to travel has come from something elusive, belonging in a text outside of the nature of what yourself. And here we have this little moment where this person describes at least getting to the train station in Paris in order to travel to London. So the train obviously would travel to, in those days, down to Calais, and then off you'd go on a ship. And he goes to this English tavern, which is interesting. It was dark and smoky, with a line of beer pools along a counter which was spread with hams as brown as violins and lobsters, the colour of red lead. Seated at small wooden tables were robust English women with boyish faces, teeth as big as palette knives, cheeks as red as apples, and long hands and feet. Des Esseintes found a table and ordered some oxtail soup. So all of this he's doing, he's experiencing what you would experience when you travel. He's experiencing to him the exotic, which is the way of being a Londoner, a particular Londoner of the 1800s, which is what this clearly is: oxtail soup and roast beef and potatoes and pints of ale and Stilton and whatnot, which a lot hasn't changed. As then he came to the actual physical act of travelling, he comes to the realization that the physical act of travelling is nightmarish, is horrible. Being under a state of perpetual movement and being foisted around the place and as cattle is something that one wouldn't desire at all. And so we get this issue of we want to travel, but travel's hard. And when we think about the art of travel, we think about something which is beautiful, artistic. But then he's reminding us that there is very much a reality to this. He would have to board a train, fight a porter, endure an unfamiliar bed, stand in queues, feel cold, and move his fragile frame around the sights that Boudicca had so tersely described, and thus soil his dreams. Which is, of course, when you come across the place that you're desiring to go to, is it as great as what it really is? We go back to even our Idiot Abroad, the all-right wall of China is exactly the issue. And he realises that travel is a thing of the mind. And so if you're already there emotionally because of what you're reading and what you're eating and what you're feeling and what you're dealing with, then surely you don't need the actual physical act of travel at all. So he paid the bill, left the tavern, and took the first train back to his villa, along with his trunks, his packages, his portmanteau, his rugs, his umbrellas, and his sticks, and never left home again. We are familiar with the notion that the reality of travel is not what we anticipate. Okay? It must always be disappointing if you are a pessimist. But it may be truer and more rewarding to suggest that it's primarily different. And so we get the positive reaction. Okay? And he actually, de Botton, decides to travel after 2 months of anticipation. There's a repetition of that word On a cloudless February mid-afternoon, I touched down, along with my travelling companion, M, at Barbados's Grantley Arms Airport. So we have a companion, of course, and we also realise that we're in a place where there's no cloud. The contrast to the London grey skies is clear and obvious. In only a few hours, I had travelled to a heat and a humidity that at home would have not occurred for another 5 months, and even then would never have achieved such intensity. So he's gone somewhere completely different and new and exotic. As the sequence moves on, we start to understand why he brought up that issue of a Frenchman desiring not to travel to London, because as he arrives in Barbados, he reminds us, or de Botton reminds us of a failing that we all have in our own selves, that we imagine our travel to be quite simple and straightforward: arrive at an airport, arrive at a hotel. He forgets about the issues in the in-between. So this lovely description of the Barbados airport, it seems quite nice and loving and interesting, but then we start to realise that all is not what it seems. In anticipation, there had simply been a vacuum between the airport and my hotel. Nothing had existed in my mind between the last line on the itinerary, the beautifully rhythmic arrival BA 2155 at 15:35, and the hotel room. I had no thought of, and now protested inwardly at the appearance of, a luggage carousel with a frayed rubber mat, 2 flies dancing above an overflowing ashtray, the giant fan turning inside the arrivals hall, a white taxi with a fake leopard skin-lined dashboard, a stray dog in a stretch of waste ground beyond the airport, an advertisement for luxury condos at a roundabout, a factory called Bardak Electronics, a row of buildings with red and green tin roofs, a rubber strap in the central pillar of the car upon which was written in very small print, Volkswagen Wolfsburg, a brightly coloured bush whose name I didn't know, a hotel reception area which showed the time in 6 different locations, and a card pinned on the wall nearby that read, with 2 months' delay, Merry Christmas. This quite wonderful and humorous list, and it is humorous in the way he does it, reminds us of all of our experiences of initial travel and where we are and how we are. We're as far away from art at the moment as could possibly be, and so therefore we are probably suggestive of the fact that there is a delay in the quest, or there's something going on in his mind, and he can't quite get that moment of magic yet. But the anticipation, and we know there's anticipation in this title, is that of course we imagine that that's going to come. The description creates a reality, or brings us back to reality, that suggests that de Botton is much like many of us, and therefore is he just merely a tourist? And he's used the word tourist already once in this chapter, and that's often used in a derisive way by many people. So we get this rather great list of things that he sees in Barbados, which is not what we think of course, when we think of Barbados. If we are inclined to forget how much there is in the world beside that which we anticipate, then works of art are perhaps a little to blame, for in them we find the same process of simplification or selection at work as in the imagination. So hence an artistic pursuit must indeed cut out all those elements of ugliness and only search for beauty. There again we have the romantic voice, because many of you would be clearly of the mind that many artists certainly don't look just for beauty. They try and produce the ugly in their art, particularly in the modern art. But de Botton reminds us that he is, of course, at heart a romantic. Art to him is the pursuit of beauty. Artistic accounts involve severe abbreviations of what reality will force upon us. A travel book may tell us, for example, that a narrator journeyed through the afternoon to reach the hill town of X, and after a night in its medieval monastery awoke to a misty dawn. But we never simply journey through an afternoon. We sit in a train, lunch digests awkwardly within us. The seat cloth is grey, we look out of the window at a field, and we look back inside. A drum of anxieties revolves in consciousness. We notice a luggage label affixed to a suitcase in a rack above the opposing seats. And so this list, this rather dull idea of travel continues for a while. It starts to rain. A drop wends a muddy path down the dust-coated window. We wonder where the ticket might be. We look back at out the field. It continues to rain. At last the train starts to move, passes an iron bridge, after which it stops inexplicably. A flyer lands on the window. We're right down to the very, very, very essence of observation. We're describing the local insect wildlife that live inside the built trains and environments. We have gone from the desire of going out of the grey skies of London and this great idea of travel into a dusty, dirty, rained-on, fly-ridden train. It's not what we expected because it's not what he expected. So therefore we're in that position. A storyteller who provided us with a profusion of details would rapidly grow maddening. Unfortunately, life often subscribes to this mode of storytelling, wearing us with repetitions, misleading emphases, and inconsequential plot lines. It consists on showing us Barjack electronics and so forth. So he's putting himself in his own voice, saying, my descriptions are not what you would normally expect from a narrative because, of course, you shouldn't expect it, and I've thrown it all in there. So there's a meta-narrative going on here. There's an attempt to actually put you in that false sense as a reader as to what his purposes and intentions may be, which explains the curious phenomenon whereby valuable elements may be easier to experience in art and anticipation than in reality. The anticipatory and artistic imaginations emit and compress, they cut away the periods of boredom and direct our attention to critical moments, without either lying or embellishing, thus lend to life a vividness and a coherence that it may lack in the distracting woolliness of the present. So he suggests, of course, the purpose value of his narrative. The art of travel is to do that very thing. This is what I should be doing with my narrative. This is what I haven't done yet. When I've arrived in Barbados, I've given you the electronics store. I shouldn't have done that, but I've done it. As I lay awake in bed on my first Caribbean night, looking back on my journey, there were crickets and shufflings in the bushes outside. That's perfectly okay. Already the confusion of the present moment began to recede, and certain events to assume prominence for memory was in this respect similar to anticipation, an instrument of simplification and selection. So he's able to bring it back to the idea of an artistic pursuit. De Botton continues on with our dear Sensiators and a similar theme with his supposed failed trip to Holland, where, of course, the everyday is always has a greater impact when you travel somewhere than the artistic sense. So if you're traveling for an artistic pursuit, why not just go to a gallery like the Louvre and have a look and experience the place that way? Because there, to see fields of flowers, you're not going to see fields that are preparing themselves with ploughing or anything like that. The paradox of feeling more in Holland when in a French gallery is at the crux of what is going on in a lot of this particular chapter. And so again, he's questioning why he was in Barbados, I suppose, and he's going through that negative sort of sense. And so we're still waiting for him to find the reason to be there and the purpose behind what he is endeavouring to do.